Hi there, welcome to the Columbia Crest Facebook Live. I'm Juan Muñoz-Oca, head winemaker for Columbia Crest, and with me is Reid Klei, colleague, also winemaker, and we're going to walk you today through a few things that happen here in the barrel room where we age our wines. A lot of things happen between harvest and crush and actually bottling the wines, and so we're going to maybe walk you through the things that we taste and the things that we look for as we take a look at these wines as they age and they become what finally is the wine that we put in the bottle. So throughout the whole Facebook Live event today, just send us your questions. We'll be answering as much as we can, as well as we can figure out. And follow with us as we taste some of these great wines that we make in the Columbia Valley. So the first thing we're going to do is maybe talk briefly about different vessels for fermentation. And the vessels we use for different reasons to express fruit in a different way, and they allow us to make wines that have different characteristics that we can reach out to put the final blends together to make a wine that is maybe better than the sum of its parts, right? So the first wine that we're going to taste with Reid today is a Sauvignon Blanc. This wine comes from a Zirkel vineyard, which is actually across the street from Columbia Crest Winery, and overlooking the Columbia River. It's a cool spot, beautifully managed by Jennifer Herman and Tom Merkel. And we love this place because it's maybe the first Sauvignon Blanc that we pick any given harvest. This is 2016, and the first sample is from a stainless steel tank. So we harvest this fairly green very early. For those wine geeks out there, we harvest this year at 19 bricks, which is very, very early. And the wine shows a lot of herbal notes, a lot of green characters. And this first sample is from stainless steel, which we feel captures a lot of the freshness of the wine. The stainless allows us to cool the tank, and so we hold on to a lot of the aromatics.
They're really fresh and aromatic.
There's a little lime. And the texture of the wine is just very sharp. It's very bright. It's a very refreshing finish. And I think we lean on to stainless steel to deliver those characteristics on the final wine. Just a lot of freshness, a lot of really sharp edges at the end. A wine that is, has a vibrant acidity that frames all the fruit that we capture in the Sauvignon Blanc. So the second wine, and here's when it gets really interesting for us, it's the same grapes, harvested the same day, but we fermented this wine in concrete instead of stainless steel. And the concrete, the material of the vessel is not only important to us because concrete can breathe, and so there's oxygen going through the vessel into the wine that we're making, but perhaps more importantly, the concrete allows us to shape the fermentation vessel in different ways. When we use stainless steel, it's just a cylinder, the wine is in there, the solids produced during fermentation drop to the bottom of the tank, and that's it. When we play with concrete, we can make interesting shapes for our tanks, and that helps us not only to manage the fermentation kinetics and the temperature of the fermentation, but perhaps more importantly, allow us to help the solids stay in touch with the wine a little bit longer. So let's give this a try. It's the same grapes, harvested the same day, just fermented in a concrete tulip-shaped tank. I love the tulip because it keeps the solids in touch with the wine. That adds a lot of texture to the meat palate.
Yeah, big difference between the two. Just a fuller palate, broader, a lot of nice texture, minerality in there.
And there's a mineral tone to wine, which I believe it's given not only by the oxygen that goes through the concrete, but it's so what we see here is two very different wines made from the same grapes. And the difference between the wines are given just by the vessel in which we ferment these grapes. And the idea is that we can give each other a lot of tools so we can build then a better wine, which at the end of the day is the wine that you see at home. Today we're going to try the H3 Sauvignon Blanc from the Horseman Hills. This is a twist off, as you can see, and we use that to maybe convey the image of freshness that we try to capture in our Sauvignon Blanc. This 2015 vintage, which is our current release. These wines are going to be bottled at some point at the end of April, and we'll see the market in the summer of 2017, which they will be very well received, but they're fresh, and it's a perfect wine for a summer afternoon.
Yeah.
So when I taste our H3 Sauvignon Blanc, what I see is a combination of the characteristics that we saw in both the concrete fermented and the stainless steel fermented Sauvignon Blanc, right? So we see a lot of the freshness, really sharp finish. Finish is clean, it's very inviting, but we also see a lot of the texture in the meat palate that was developed by fermenting some of the wine in concrete and leaving it on the lees for at least 4 or 5 months, right?
Yeah, it's a really good combination and balance of the two different fermentation styles here.
So the idea of fermenting in different fermentation vessels and then aging the wine in perhaps different barrel types, leaving the wine in oak for different length of time, allows us to create different expressions of the same fruit that then will come together to make a better wine. We are after wines that are approachable yet very complex, and I think the idea of adding complexity by using different fermentation vessels and using different barrels allows us to make a wine that it's maybe perhaps a little bit more interesting, right? And so to that point, we experiment a fair amount at Columbia Crest. We're very playful with the vessels, and all of that comes from just our eagerness to discover new things and discover how we can use techniques that can develop maybe new layers into our winemaking. So we're going to try a wine together today that is very unique. This is a Riesling that was fermented on the skins, and it's been in touch with the skins since fermentation ended in Halloween of 2016. So it's been on the skins for a few months. We call it an orange wine, which it's industry talk for a white wine that is made following a red fermentation protocol. So we ferment on the skins, we do pump overs, we mix the wine with the skins, and the result is a wine that has a tremendous amount of aromas. It's very, very floral. It smells like grapefruit.
Yeah, that's really nice.
It's very intense when it comes to aromatics. It has a lot of tannin because we ferment on the skins, so we extract a lot of tannins from both the skins and the seeds.
You can see a lot of that settlement in the bottle there still too.
You can see a lot of that, which it makes the texture of the wine very silky and smooth. It's just tremendously interesting. It's a little bitter in the finish. And this is the wine that we don't know if it's going to make it into the bottle or not. But the idea is that we're sharing with you our eagerness to try new things, to sometimes become a wine that will go into the tasting room, or become a club wine, or a very unique reserve bottling. But sometimes it just informs the winemaking that we do at the winery. We've fermented some Sauvignon Blanc on the skins before, and that helped us. That never became an orange wine or Sauvignon Blanc, but it helped us develop this technique in which we ferment our Sauvignon Blanc that goes into H3 for a day or two in contact with the skins. And so we're hoping that this Riesling perhaps will teach us something about extracting more from the Riesling skins, which normally they're pressed and dumped before fermentation, but we're hoping this will help us, and then that in turn will create more complex wines at the end of the day. It's really interesting. It's a little grapefruit.
Yeah, it is wildly different than the Rieslings that we typically make at Columbia Crest.
Throughout the entire Facebook Live that we're doing today, if you want to send us your questions, we'll be checking our phones and we'll be answering questions as they come in. Please feel free to answer the questions. I want to talk briefly about barrel aging and what they do for our wines, because it's an important part of the process. The barrel making is perhaps as interesting and as complex as our winemaking. where the oak comes from, the forest in which the oak grows, how they season their oak once the tree is cut, how they put together their barrels, how they toast the inside, how deep the toast level is.
So many different variables in there.
And every single one of those variables expresses itself in the wine a lot differently, right? And so what we try to do is we try to make different wines by reaching out to different fermentation vessels. And then we put those wines in different barrel types. And then each one of those becomes a different wine, right? Following a very different path. And so what we do then is we reach out to all of these components to build a wine that will be maybe complex, yet elegant and very approachable, which I think is what Columbia Crest friends and family expect from our winemaking. There's two things that happen in our wines when they go to oak. So after fermentation is done, we put our wines into barrel, and the two things that happen are, A, we get a lot of flavors and aromas from the oak, right? So when you smell a wine and it has a caramel aroma, it has like a bake or a toasty aroma, all of that comes from the oak, right? And a lot of that comes from the toasting process that we do to inside of the barrels. And then the second thing that happens is not only we get aromas and flavors from the oak, but through the vessel, we get air going into the wine. And that oxygen, the very little amounts of oxygen that goes into the wine, help us develop the tannins that go from maybe rough and I would call them sticky to a silkier texture. They resolve themselves into a wine that is a lot more enjoyable and a lot more, maybe a lot silkier, right? And so as those two things happen in our barrels, what we do is we do inventory tastings maybe every month, maybe every 5 or 6 weeks. And so we try to get an idea of how those barrels are working with the wine, and that will help us not only to figure out how long the wines will be known, but then help us figure out what barrel types and from where we're going to get these barrels for our wines. And each wine in our portfolio has a different barrel profile that will help us develop a different flavor profile. So what we're going to do now is we're going to taste 3 wines from the 2016 vintage. They're all Merlot from a fantastic place in the Walloop Slope called Stone Tree Vineyard. And we're going to try 3 different fermentation vessels, and we'll talk through maybe the nuances of those wines that are made by the vessel in which we ferment these grapes. So the first one is a Stone Tree Merlot. It was fermented in a stainless steel tank. I think you like Stone Tree, don't you?
Yeah, so Stone Tree is just one of our favorite vineyards. Like Juan said, it's in the Walloop Slope appellation, which is one of the warmest appellations in the Washington state. It's up at one of the highest elevations within the slope, so it's just a beautiful area. Ted Wildman, the vineyard manager there, is just meticulous. The grapes are just perfectly pruned. There's a lot of sun exposure, just big, bright, bold fruit. So when this fruit comes in, it's super aromatic, but at the same time, it can get pretty tannic and a little rough. So what we want to do with this fruit when it comes in is preserve this nice fruit aromatics, but at the same time try to tone down that roughness. So one of the ways we can do that is with different fermentation vessels, like we did here.
Tame the tannins as we hold on to maybe a lot of that richness and fruitness. We have, before we dive into Stone Tree Merlot, we have a question from Alice. She said, would you ever put different types of grapes in one barrel during aging? And we do that all the time. There's a lot of wines that are maybe co-fermented. It's very normal for us to co-ferment Viognier with Syrah. Viognier is a white variety, Syrah is a red variety. We throw those two together. We feel like Viognier brings a lot of maybe flowery aromas and flavors that Syrah wouldn't have otherwise. And so we capture those, and then that wine as a final blend goes into oak. And then, although the wine is already blended, the different oak types will give us one more chance to do another blending. So at the end of the aging, let's say 18 months, we will sit down with like maybe 10 wines that are the same blend, but they're 10 different barrel types. And so they all taste different. And then that gives him one more chance to blend and try to make a complex wine towards the end of the aging process. I hope that helps. So we'll do stainless steel from Stone Tree Merlot. Merlot grows so beautifully in Washington. It has this like very fresh expression of white fruit. In Stone Tree, it's probably one of the best examples of Merlot in Washington State. The stainless steel, in my mind, gives the wine a lot of freshness. There's a lot of focus to the wine. Although, as Reid was saying, the tannins are maybe not as resolved as we would like them. There's a lot of fruit in the wine. And so we take the fruit and then we'll deal with the tannins as we move on to a different vessel.
Yeah, the stainless steel is just, it's what we typically use for the wines at Crest. It's just round, it's a solid wine. It really shows the variety well. It's just a fruit-forward, great expression.
We have a lot of capabilities when it comes to stainless steel. Those are things that are very easy to clean and sanitize. We make sure that, yes, just the yeast that comes from the vineyard will actually carry fermentation if needed. We also have great control over the temperature of the fermentation, right? Because we have jackets around these tanks. We can warm up the juice or we can cool it off. So it gives us a lot of control, yet we feel like, because to make a stainless steel tank, you have to do a cylinder. The skins and the seeds float to the top of the tank during fermentation. They form what we call a cap. And that cap just floats freely on top of the tank. So maybe that's why we have to take the wine from the bottom, irrigate the top of the cap, and that's how we extract the color and the flavors. And perhaps that's when we're pushing a little bit too hard and we get some tannins that are maybe too harsh. Perhaps like if you were to forget your tea bag where you're brewing tea, and then the tea becomes a little astringent, right? So what we've done over the last decade or so is maybe try the same grapes fermenting in perhaps a different vessel to see if we can form a cap that interacts with the wine differently, delivering the same intensity on the nose and the same ripe fruit, but perhaps more resolved or silkier tannin. So we're going to give it a try now to a Stone Tree fermented in an oak fermenter. And the shape of the oak fermenter is different from the stainless steel. The stainless steel is a cylinder. The oak fermenter, it's, I would say, maybe has a conical shape, so it's much smaller up on top. And we feel like when the cap is forming, the shape of the tank keeps the cap maybe half submerged. Yeah. Or at least it cannot float. So we're getting a lot of extraction just without having to pump the wine over. Right? Checking for questions.
Yeah, so that oak tank is just a lot more richer aromatically. It seems to have more complexity going on in the nose just initially.
So there's this aspect of fermenting in oak in which we are actually getting tannins from the skins and the seeds through fermentation, but we also get a lot of tannin from the oak itself, from the tank. And I think that helps the tannins develop this like silkier texture. Mm-hmm. And I love the way these wines are shown today. But again, same comment as how different these wines can be, although it's the same grapes, harvested the same day, and the only difference right now is just one fermented in stainless steel, the other one fermented in oak tank, and they have like very different expressions of the same fruit. Very interesting as well.
Question?
We have another question. Raphael is asking, do you use new barrels or any barrels on white wine? And the answer is we do ferment a lot of our white wines in oak. A fair amount of those barrels are brand new. We do use oak in maybe varieties that we feel are, they have enough tannin and structure to support the oak. And when we do so, we ferment the white wines in oak. So we do that for Chardonnay. If you have a glass of Columbia Crest Grand Estate Chardonnay or Columbia Crest H3 Chardonnay, you'll get a lot of vanilla and caramel, like maybe buttery, maybe like burnt sugar characteristics. And all of those come from fermenting the wine in barrel, right? There's some varieties in which we stay away from barrel, like the freshness of Sauvignon Blanc is more conducive to either stainless or concrete. But Chardonnay fermenting, we do some Rhone varieties, we do Viognier, we do Marsanne, Roussanne. So we're very playful with the oak, and when it fits, and when we feel like people will appreciate the impact of that will go after it.
I think there was one more question just popped up there.
We have another question. Joe is asking, how many times you use your barrels, and what do you do with them when you're done? So we feel like we use the barrels about 5 times. We call them 5 uses, which depending on the length of the aging for that specific wine, that can be up to 7 to 8 years, maybe 10. We've been very lucky lately. Once we're done with our barrels, we buy them new, we use them for 7, maybe 8, 9 years, and then we ship them to this facility, which will actually take the heads off, we'll char the inside, put the head back on, and then we'll use it for maybe Irish whiskey or bourbon. And so that adds another maybe 20 or 30 years to the life of that barrel, which make us feel great about chopping those trees and then using it for our winemaking. It's a lovely way to reuse a resource that we lean on to make our wines a little bit more interesting and perhaps to deliver what the consumers feel it's high quality wines with just a great price point. So we'll do the last one. The last expression of Stone Tree Merlot, it's wine fermented in concrete. And then it's a really cool tank. Our concrete fermenters are cubes. It's like 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. So if you think about all the skins bubbling and surfacing up on top of the tank, the ratio between the skins and juice is what we call 1-to-1, right? Now that has a lot more mineral tone than the rest of the wines. I think it has more focus, fruit flavors. It's very floral in style.
Yeah, a lot more complexity in the aromatics here. A lot more going on. Like you said, that minerality in the background just adds another layer to that bright fruit, brings a little more to it.
So what we've seen is grapes harvested the same day, come into the winery, they ferment, so they spend maybe 7, maybe 9 days on the skins, and they ferment in very different vessels. And that makes 3 very different wines, right? So stainless steel, it's a little tannic, yet has a lot of intensity on the fruit. The oak, again, has much more a silkier texture than the other wines, and has more resolved tannins. And then the concrete has mineral tone, it has a very flowery characteristics to it. And then what we do is at the end of the aging, once we have this wine in oak for, let's say, 20, 22 months, this will become part of our Walter Klei, which is our red blend, perhaps the iconic wine at the winery. And what we're given is just 3 very different wines made with the same grapes. They have 3 very different expressions of Merlot that we can use to build a wine that will be complex, but perhaps more importantly, better than each one of the wines that we use to put it together, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll try now the 2013 Walter Klei. It's a red wine we serve. We tried to make the Klei Merlot based, and that's for a couple of reasons, because we're in love with Merlot in Washington State. We think it's a tremendous expression of the variety in Washington. And because the other reserve wine you will see and about from Columbia Crest, it's Cabernet Sauvignon. So we give you an excuse to buy both the reserve Cabernet and the Walter Klei. And the Klei, which is a red blend, is named after Dr. Walter Klei, who was the grandfather of viticulture in Washington State. Just a cool story. He moved to Washington in 1937 from Oklahoma City. And he did not know anything about wine, but he showed up in Washington State and he realized that this could be a good place to grow grapes. And so he changed his, he came to WSU, Washington State University, to do his PhD and changed his focus from, I think it was fruit, like tree fruit.
Yeah.
To viticulture, and he planted the first vinifera grapes in Washington State, and we built this thriving industry, which is the second largest in the U.S., on his learnings back in the early 40s.
Yeah.
So this vintage of the Walter Klei is 65% Merlot it's 35% Cabernet Sauvignon. We have a little bit of Cabernet Franc and a little bit of Malbec. A lot of Stone Tree Merlot goes into the water chlor, and a lot of the layers that we build into the chlor, we feel are made out during fermentation because of different vessels, and then a lot of the complexity we gain throughout the aging process as the wines evolve, quietly in our barrel room for up to 22 to 24 months.
So this wine, again, was aged 2 years in oak, and now it's had a year in bottle, and it's really starting to express itself. The fruit's showing, it's starting to soften up a little bit. It's hitting its prime right now.
We have another question. Andy says, why are there different barrel sizes, right? And so, Andy, the different sizes, if you remember, the two things that happen when you put wine in oak are you get flavors and aromas from the oak into the wine. And so if you can imagine, these barrels behind us are 59 gallons, and you can get 120 gallons, 300 gallons, 500 gallons. And so if you have it, the same wine goes into a 59-gallon barrel, and then the same wine goes into a 120-gallon barrel, you have less surface in the larger barrel, and so you get less of those aromas and flavors into the wine, so it's more delicate. So the bigger the tank, the bigger the barrel, the less impact that oak has into our wines. So really cool questions, because we have actually very different sizes at the winery, and we use them for different varieties, for different wines, and for very different reasons. We'll do another question. Allison is asking, do you char the barrels before using them, or that is just for spirits? We talked briefly about it. We toast our barrels very lightly for winemaking. And then once we're done with these barrels, somebody will actually char the inside of them and then use it for spirits. But we are very delicate with the toasting process. We want to get those sugars that are part of the oak caramelize just a bit, but we don't want to char the barrel, because that will be like maybe too impactful when it comes to giving flavors to the wine. Yeah. Stephanie is asking, how long can red wines and white wines be cellared? So we build our red wines to be ready to enjoy as soon as you buy the bottle. You can take it home and drink it, but we also build them to age gracefully. They will gain in complexity. Their texture will actually resolve itself over the years. I'd say our reserve red wine will drink beautifully for 10, 15, maybe 20 years. My favorite wines from Columbia Crest, the reserve reds, today are from the late 90s, 98, 99. Yeah. H3 in Granite States, you can probably age for 5, 10, maybe 15 years. And our white wines are maybe meant to be drunk a little bit earlier. If you like a little bit of age on maybe Chardonnay, I think 5 years to maybe 7 or 10 years. It's just a great way to deal with that. Most of our aromatic white wines are meant to be drunk within 2 or 3 years. I'll do one more question because we're running out of time. And so Emily is asking, what's the difference between new oak and neutral oak? And we did not talk about that, but as you can imagine, Emily, if you have brand new oak, it has a lot of aromas and flavors that are given to the wine. And if you have neutral oak, we call neutral a barrel that has been used before with another wine. And so that has less aromas and flavors to give to the wine, less tannins to give to the wine. It still has the ability to transfer a lot of air and oxygen through the vessel, but the aromatic impact on the wine is much less. So what we do is just we deal with a combination of new and neutral to maybe fine-tune the nose and the flavor profile for our wine. Okay, so next time you're drinking a glass of Columbia Crest, you should notice some of the different flavors and uniqueness that come from the grapes, and more importantly, from our experimentation and the way we treat these grapes to make different wines, and then to put them together into a wine that is complex yet approachable, and that's just, I think, behind every single wine that we make at Columbia Crest.